All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next series of our workshop doing basement waterproofing, and we'll cover all the ins and outs and do's and don'ts of basement waterproofing. Thanks for joining us today. So what we'll cover today, just the standards and basement waterproofing, common causes of water leak issues in basements, typical solutions to basement water leaks, and then common testing methods. And then we'll run a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So a little bit about myself and Ron. So Ron, you want to give your intros?
Yeah, well, I'm the founder of basically Danrae, and been involved over 40 years in the industry. It's grown to a nice family business now. I've sort of got a building background, waterproofing background, and I sort of tend to consult on a bit of waterproofing design, and also do some peer reviews and some project management.
And myself, the current CEO of Danrae Group, and my main role is strategy, sales, and team development. And I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, and I'm also a builder and waterproofer. So a little bit about Danrae Group. We're a specialist remedial waterproofing contractor. So we do a lot of remediation with regards to waterproofing and leaks into buildings and things like that. We're a trusted family business, and we provide waterproofing to 4 main industries: strata, commercial, government, and civil. And a lot of the major projects we've completed are IKEA, Westmead Hospital, Anstow, and the Kinghorn Cancer Centre, and many more hospitals as well, such as Camden and Campbelltown hospitals. So the Australian standard. So with below ground waterproofing, there isn't actually an Australian standard for below ground. So the Australian standards that exist in waterproofing to date are actually for internal wet areas and external above ground. So where you can get some guidelines on below ground waterproofing are actually from the MBA waterproofing guides. And if you want to inquire about where to get those, we can actually send you the link to that, to the website as well. So what is basement waterproofing? So basement waterproofing generally stops the any water ingress into the below ground of a building. So we've highlighted there pretty much in red of where the waterproofing is applied. Oh, just lost my page there. Yeah, so where the waterproofing is applied. So basically, it involves the solutions that are provided by the waterproofing contractor to stop any water ingress from the lift pit all the way up through the basement, and also in some cases from the car park down into the basement as well, externally.
And from the from the drawing on the screen now, the 2 top areas, they're actually covered by the Australian standard on top. But you tend to tie them into the basement waterproofing, which is not under the standard at the moment. They are looking at it to try and get something in the near, hopefully in the future. But at the moment, you basically go with the supplier's recommendations and their specifications at the moment.
So with regards to basement waterproofing, there's a picture there for you just to give you a bit of an idea of how water ingress enters into the basement. A lot of it, you'll see, generally speaking, enters in through the footing and can actually penetrate and fill up and get absorbed into the external wall of the structure. And this is a typical sort of waterproofing application on a basement. So you'll basically have your membrane, which is the sort of that blue layer there. Then you'll have some form of protection or drainage layer as well. And then you've got either your aggregate or some form of drainage material, stone, which is installed above the aggregation pipe, which you'll see is that white pipe there sticking out. So just in here. So you'll see, so that's a standard sort of basement setup in construction. And that's sort of what it looks like. So on the left here, you've basically got a membrane being applied. Looks like some form of either spray-on polyurethane or something like that on this wall. And then you would then run your drainage, your aggie line in there, typically to a fall, to the correct falls. Sometimes that doesn't always happen though. And then you'll have sort of some blue metal or stone or something like that, and the drainage layer gets applied, or protection layer on top of this membrane, and then they backfill. So that's the basic install.
Yeah, on the right photo, you can see basically a drainage layer, a protection and drainage layer, and that drains down into the actual blue metal down at the bottom over the aggie line.
So some of the typical materials for basements we'll cover now. So as mentioned earlier, the Australian standards don't technically cover. There's no sort of conditions in the Australian standard that cover basement. However, the Australian standard does mention particular classes of membrane based on their flexibility. So we would, in general, we would recommend a class 2 or 3 membrane, more so a 3, which would give you the most expansion in the membrane. So what we'll cover here is a few examples and the type and disadvantages and advantages of the different couple of types of membranes. So the class 2 flexible systems, they're generally like a paint-on liquid. And the advantages in these, it's sort of low toxicity, so you sort of low VOC type of membranes. They're quite easy to clean up as well. But generally speaking, a sort of a water-based type of membrane we wouldn't recommend looking at it for a below ground basement situation. You want to add to that, or?
No, that's well, pretty much what Daniel's covered. They are sometimes you can get a bit of difficulty with moisture on the retaining walls and all that. So the water-based products tend to have a lot of issues. You may need to go to epoxy primers and everything. So generally, we tend to steer away from them. It's just about too much mucking around, and there's a higher risk factor in using them.
Yeah. And one of the problems with a liquid is that you've got a variable application thickness as well. So that's something that the contractor's got to be aware of in applying a liquid membrane. So another class 2 type of membrane is the torch-on systems. Some of these can be class 3 depending on the manufacturer. But you've also got with the advantages of torch-on is definitely you've got you've got a thickness there, a pretty good consistent thickness with a sheet membrane. Most of them are actually root resistant as well, and you've got the granule layer which actually stops the roots from coming through. Issues with the torch-on though is that you've got to make sure that when the torch-on's heated up that you've got a good bleed, which the bleed is where the joint is, but that's got to be protected from the roots as well if it's underground. And generally the advantages with torch-on is it's actually 2-layer most of the time as well, so you'll get a good thickness on the basement.
Yeah, you'll get generally excuse me, generally it is 2-layer, but you can get away with 1 layer depending on the warranty situation and the suppliers. They are root resistant to a certain extent. Some of them are impregnated with a root resistant chemical, so it gives them that better system. They're not compatible with PVCs, but you can detail around a lot harder to detail around PVC membranes, and then use a clamping system to hold them in position.
So class 3, these are a bit more flexible. This one's a liquid solvent-based polyurethane. So these are a bit thicker in the makeup of the liquid. So you'll get they're quite heavy as well. So and these will be applied quite thick on a basement. Pretty good. Generally you don't need sort of mixing, and they're quite fast. They cure quite fast. and they're very sort of flexible. So and they're fairly easy to apply as well. They're quite widely used in the industry for below ground. The only disadvantages would be they're generally not root resistant, and I'll show you a couple of photos with root resistance on some of the membranes, and can be quite messy too in applying these type of membranes.
And generally, you'll find that they use solvent-based polyurethanes, and a lot of them tend to use the bitumen modified membranes. So the disadvantage of them, they do leach, but generally being in the ground, it's fine. But if you have to tie into something or add onto something, it could be a bit of a problem.
Another type of class 3 is the elastomeric systems, the sheet membrane systems. So these other ones, they're generally PVC, butanol, or some form of rubber. Some of them are also FPO, TPO. So these are all types of like sheets, or they can be termed as single ply membranes, and they look a bit like a vinyl or like a sheet membrane. These are quite good. They've got a uniform thickness. A lot of them are compatible with sort of PVC fittings and outlets and things like that, so they can be welded directly onto them. And you've also got some of these type of membranes can be laid in as a what they call a blinding side membrane, and I've got some photos of those as well. And then you pour the concrete against it. So I'll show you those a bit later on. The disadvantages only really are that they require such a bit more of a higher skill level. So these type of installations are a bit more expensive, but the warranties last a lot longer with these type of membranes as well. Oh, and generally they're quite root resistant. So they've actually, due to the way they're welded together, the roots actually cannot penetrate the membrane as well.
And generally too, when we like high skilled level, I mean, most of these products are generally applied by skilled tradesmen. So, and half the time the suppliers won't even sell you the products if you're not skilled. So to eliminate any problems in the installation of it.
So some of the common issues, firstly, the drainage is an issue with basements. So as you'll see there, that's a sort of a brief sketch there on how where the Aggie line's put in, the drainage pipe. Often that's not done to a fall. So there's always a kink in the piping, or there's something with the way it's been laid in the ground. And that can actually cause a lot of issues with moisture. Especially if you get high rainfall, can cause a lot of issues with actually water build up behind the wall. One of the key issues is drainage, and the waterproofing is there to protect the moisture, but you need a very good drainage system outside the basement. Some of the common issues that are seen, you'll see a lot of issues in car parks with moisture coming through the slab. On the left there, you'll see a typical problem that we see a lot is the moisture around like plumbing or something like that, and that might be a planter box above, or a slab on above that hasn't been waterproofed properly. You can try to inject that or put a drainage system underneath that, like a tray system. But the trouble with those types of systems is they've got to be continually maintained as well. On the picture on the right is your efflorescence, the salting that comes through a concrete crack. You can repair that as well with injection and a hydrostatic membrane that you can paint over the crack and secure that. But the same thing also is that due to you've got remediating it from the reverse side, you've got to keep monitoring that and ensuring that that's either maintained or you've got to have some kind of review to make sure the salts aren't continually coming through.
Although these photos are from a slab above a car park, you can tend to get similar issues coming up on a vertical wall or a retaining wall. The only difference is you might have these stalactites and that's shown on the right. there'll just be a salt buildup on the actual wall itself.
So I just thought I'd mention this. You get a lot of issues with roots and stuff. So depending on how close the basement is, or just sort of to your trees and things that are planted near the walls, you can definitely get issues with roots, and depending on how aggressive the root system is. So as you can see there, that picture in the middle there is of a liquid polyurethane on a planter box wall, and the roots have just gone in and out. But as soon as they find a pinhole or something, it just goes in and out of the membrane. So we would recommend some form of sheet installation that is actually root repellent. So there's a few products I've listed there that are quite good for root repellent membranes, and we've installed quite a few of those, and they've been quite good with regards to root repellent.
And another thing too, with regards to planters, and it can affect retaining walls to a certain extent, is a choice of plants that you're planting right near the actual wall or in the planter box. As you can see on the right, very, very aggressive roots, and they've actually gone right through and actually started damaging the wall. So you got to be very careful of what type of actually plants you do put against the walls or in planters.
So some common below ground issues on the top left there, you'll see basically this was a tank with the water spouting out. You could basically put a tap on it, how much water was coming out. And the issue there was that the concrete wasn't vibrated enough on the installation. So we were contracted to sort of inject that and see whether we could solve the issue. We stopped a lot of that using a hydrophobic installation. Yeah, so hydrophobic membrane, basically what that means is as you inject the product, it pushes the water back in. So hydrophilic will actually react. So the injection product will react with the water and foam up and block the hole. So we were able to stop most of the leak, but the concrete vibration was a big problem. So they had to look at patching a lot of that concrete up. You want to cover the next one, the top middle one, for the rusting there?
Yeah, the top middle one, that's actually, they didn't waterproof, excuse me, they didn't waterproof the outside wall. So you're getting water coming through the coil ties in the slab, and basically just working its way through. And all the rusting, and that is just basically the coil tiles rusting and coming through. They were repaired using a plug and a reverse tanking membrane, and then that sort of resolved that issue. Then you've got on the other side, if you get enough contamination, and that you can get concrete cancer, or basically blowing the concrete out, which creates more issues for you. Things like that behind the wall can be very, very hard to fix. So they're a bit more difficult. The bottom ones, again, no membrane or failed membrane behind retaining walls, and you can see that basically it starts affecting and creating salts, and yeah, it can cause a lot of problems down the track. The one on the right was just the far right, bottom right, is just basically retaining wall out in the car park. Builders thought, oh, it's not worth waterproofing. It's only in the car park area. It's not nothing. But you can see there that the amount of water coming through is creating a lot of salts, and also starting to create rust stains, which is the actual reinforcement, which could later on down the track deteriorate. It could be structural issues.
Yeah, so a lot of the main issues we see in basements is that either the wall, that the builder will rely a lot on the products that are put into the concrete, such as Zypex and things like that. They're great waterproofing products, but they just rely on that only. And they're also the design of the wall. So you might have a plenum wall where they don't waterproof it, and they just use a wet wall design. And we see a lot of issues there where moisture still comes into the wall, and a lot of tenants want to use, say, their garage as storage or things like that, and the water's just coming through into the basement. A lot of issues that we see, the Dinsel walls have to be waterproofed correctly as well. So we find that a lot of the joints and especially the floor wall joints in Dinsel aren't waterproofed properly.
Generally, Dinsel is supposed to be sort of waterproof in itself, but unfortunately, a lot of the times it's not installed as per the manufacturer's requirements, and that's what they tend to fail a lot. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but a really reasonable amount of times.
So some of the systems we'll go through, some of the waterproofing systems we'll cover now. So as I mentioned earlier, we do quite a lot of injection into basements, and the top left one there is actually Ron drilling in some packers into the concrete. And on the right, on the top there, you've got that's actually a damp-proof, liquid damp-proof course that gets installed. So that would be rising damp coming up, being absorbed into the brickwork, and that's how we actually install a new liquid flashing in there. The bottom left is a bentonite sheet. So this type of membrane gets installed before you backfill. And the way this one works is you've got it on the reverse side. So behind that shiny black covering is a bentonite clay. So what happens there is when you've got pressure against that membrane, and if there's a leak, the clay will actually expand. And the theory is that the clay will expand and then block the hole, and that's how that functions, that membrane. And on the bottom right, you've got PVC. So that picture there is from the Fatra website, and that sheet there is the yellow membrane gets installed, and then you can actually see. Basically, it's made up of two colours. So you've got a yellow and a black. And then if there's any punctures or you can see the pinholes in the sheet, it will show up because the exposed sides is actually yellow. Some more systems that we've used. So you basically got some, the top two are what they call blinding membranes. And these are actually installed onto the formwork before you pour the concrete. And then your formwork's then stripped off. So, and what happens there is it's forming either a chemical or mechanical bond to the concrete itself. So these are used pretty much as like a building liner. So they basically cover the whole basement. So from walls and floors. You can also get blinding systems made out of the bitumen sheet membranes as well. And they can be also you can either torch them on, or you can use the torch on, or the peel and stick systems that are actually used for basement waterproofing as well. So an example of the below ground, so with the blinding membrane, you would actually cover the whole basement envelope underneath the basement in the car park. And this is an example of what that actually looks like. So you would basically, you could see there that the guys are actually applying the membrane to the floor, and it will go up the walls. So hopefully this video plays. This is an example of another system that's fairly new to Australia, and we're one of the applicators of it. So this is the Newton, what's called the Newton 500 system. This is used to drain away moisture into an existing basement from the inside. So you'll see basically what happens is a drainage application gets installed. And then what happens is it actually allows moisture to come in from the outside and is drained away into the walls and then down into that white drainage system there, that base drain. Then the base drain will then flow into a pump, and then the pump then pumps out the moisture. So in England, they've developed this system to build down underground, basically, to get more living space. And what you're seeing there is the green, that's actually insulation, and then all your coverings get installed on top of that.
With this system, it's more about controlling the water rather than try, block it and or fight to stop it from coming through. This is more about controlling it and making it being pumped out and creating a very dry environment.
So as you can see now, they're just putting the finishes on now. So you can insulate the room, and then so you turn it into a complete living space. So we've used this system in areas where it's very difficult to control or sort of push back the water, because as you may know, that water just will keep tracking around the basement. So we can use this system to we know where the water's coming in from, so we can use this to actually filter it out and then pump it out of the area. So some examples of testing and during the installation. So during install, very common in waterproofing is wet film thickness. This would be used on a liquid membrane on a basement. So and all the measurements and what you would expect to get out of a membrane would be on the product data sheet. So the applicator should be installing sort of on every coat should be at a certain thickness. So the way this gauge would read, on this particular gauge shown here, the membrane is above 100 microns to 125. So in this case, that would be almost like paint. So it's quite thin. So you're looking at any membrane that would be applied on a basement, you'd be looking at probably 1,000 micron or 1 mil thick or something like that per coat when you're applying it. Dry film thickness, we use a ultrasonic tester. So in this case, you're testing the membrane when it's dry. So you would make sure that you're getting the correct dry film thickness on a liquid membrane on the walls, and then you would check with the data sheet or ensure that you had the correct thickness on the walls of the basement. Other testing methods available, you've got seam testing, high voltage testing, and EFEM, generally not so much and low voltage, not so much on basements, but you can test if you've got a conductive medium like on the wall. But generally speaking, you would be doing a seam test on if it was a sheet membrane, you'd be checking where the membranes have been welded. And you can also use high voltage if the wall is concrete as well. So a quick case study. This one was the Randwick substation. So this was installed using a product called Seeker-Proof A. And this was one of the blinding membranes that I explained earlier. So we basically laid in the Seeker-Proof A to the specifications. You can see there it basically gets fixed up to the wall, and then the formwork's installed after that, and then the concrete is then poured, and then the formwork is stripped. So you can see there it went up multiple levels, and then we basically keep just joining on the membrane as you go up. On the bottom right, you'll also see some patches there. So they are actually part of the Seeker-Proof A system. So they get installed as almost like a tape that bonds to the membrane, and then you won't get that off. So it basically bonds as one system.
Yeah, that's probably I'd say there'd be penetrations that have been put through the membrane, and those patches are just covering all those basically.
The new Seeker-Proof A Plus now from Seeker is actually a heat welded system. So this particular one shown here relied on a tape to join the laps. The new Seeker-Proof A.
Yeah, and it does still incorporate taping as well.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have the taping behind the old system used to, which is very awkward to get down.
Okay, if you would like to, if you've got any questions that you'd like to post up, I will open up the chat window, and happy to answer any questions if you've got any. I'll just wait. Just wait for any to come in.
But ideally, you're better off making sure that the installation is, or the retaining walls are waterproofed correctly in the first time, and spend the extra money initially, because the reverse tanking issues and repairs are much more costly and much more time consuming as well, in some cases.
All right, so we'll no questions have come through yet. So what we'll do, we will continue to release these webinars. So if you didn't catch any of the earlier ones, or you wanted to know a bit more about this webinar, feel free to send us an email, and we can actually send you some information, or and also let you know when the next one will be. But thank you very much for attending, and hope you've enjoyed it. And please send your feedback through if you really want to know a bit more about basements or what type of membranes. We're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, or maybe we might have covered something a bit too briefly, or went over it quickly. Yeah, just by all means, let us know, and we're quite happy to give you all the information you require.
Just a quick question from Peter regarding the updated standard for basements. The Australian standard is currently being reviewed now. However, Ron, you might be able to know because you're on the committee, so you might.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'm a member of the Australian Institute of Waterproofing, and a couple of the gentlemen in there are actually on the committee, and they are at the moment going through the pros and cons about membraning a basement. So still a while in discussion. It could be a little bit longer to come out.
Could be a while yet, yeah.
But
so
it's just initial discussions, and they're trying to sort of iron out any difficulties at the moment.
Yeah. So
and the best thing really is the suppliers, as reputable suppliers that do retaining walls or below ground membranes, follow their standards and follow their requirements, and you usually can't go wrong. At the moment, I think the MBA were talking about having a below ground one, but I believe they haven't as yet. Planter boxes, terraces, they're all covered in the external standard 4654. Okay, but at the moment, the others, we just have to follow the suppliers. And if you get a reputable waterproofer or a company, then they'll pick the right membrane for you.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up. So, and what about levels? Okay, so what about levels below groundwater head? Oh, head pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you've either got it, like, depending on what it is, but you've either got injection, or you've got to get the right hydrostatic membrane.
Yeah. Basically, like some of the membranes, the internal reverse tank, what we call reverse tanking membranes, can handle pretty decent head of pressure. Okay, again, applied correctly. The only problem is if you've got retaining walls that are being painted and all things like this, they all have to be stripped back to original concrete or block work, so the membranes can get a grip on the old original substrate.
So if you wanted to know just a couple, the cementitious ones that we would look at probably be the Seeker-Proof A. The 1K and the Dry Zorro types of membranes.
Yeah.
They would give you,
The question there, Vandex. Yeah, we have used ourselves. We have used Vandex successfully. Same thing. Follow their requirements step by step. They've got different products for different situations in relation to that, and they're quite good.
Yeah,
they're quite good.
Yeah, they'll hold back quite a decent head of pressure. The Vandex membranes, and the Dry Zorro product range. Also, they've got a particular application for Dinsel as well.
Well, they've been actually, Dry Zorro has actually been tested with Dinsel, and they've got approval from Dinsel. So if you do happen to have a situation with Dinsel walls, then they've got an approval or system that works on a Dinsel.
Yeah. All right. give a little bit more, but I think that's all the questions. I think. All right, guys.
All right. Thanks, Peter, for that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Peter, for the questions, and we will touch base pretty soon for our next webinar, and please look out for that. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Thank you very much. Catch you later.